Thank you very much for inviting me here and giving me this time to speak to all of you. It's really, I sort of almost parachuted in here actually, because I just called some people from the DC, Maryland area and found that they were all leaving for Seattle. And suddenly they just said, why don't you come there if you can come for a day? And here I am. So in the midst of this green imprint, an American friend of mine said to me, well, you're going to Seattle, but you're leaving a big carbon imprint. So that's true, I'm coming and going. But it's still, for me, something that really is actually quite worthwhile, because I've watched aid through people and over the years, not in this kind of occasion at all. And it's been an opportunity, even these last hour and a half or so has been really an opportunity to see and learn. And I'd like to start from there actually, that Shankar and Aruna, two of my colleagues, the three of us who went to begin work in Devdungri, in this little village in 1987, they came here, I think about 8 or 9 years ago. 2002. So yeah, almost 8 years ago. And both of them came back with lots of friends and lots of stories, and actually a new opening for us about what the community outside connected with people in India could and were doing, and the capacity of that community to influence many things. Today it's been certainly eye-opening for me, and the thing that struck me the most actually in this discussion that's taken place is, why is it we don't have an organization or organizations like this within India itself? Because we have so many people within India doing similar kind of work to what all of you are doing here. Just the fact that you live many miles and continents away does not make it necessary that you cannot have the same sets of people doing all these many things that you're doing. Not exactly the same, but it's something that the whole business of funding, support, participation, all of them are very skewed actually within the Indian context. And it's something that I think those of you who keep going back, I know there's an Aid India chapter, and I know it tries to do something different. I don't know the details, but I just thought that this was a very, very interesting discussion. I want to say to congratulate you from my side and appreciate what I've seen for this last hour and a half, because the fact of having an organization that supports, that is democratic itself, that is contributory, that is voluntary, is something that is really missing in the Indian context. Traditionally, we have the Mai Baap. In Rajasthan, we have these big Sethjis who contribute for a pyao or a hospital or a school, but not really for development. And it's something in terms of not just philanthropy, but development and change that I think it's something that we need to think about. Anyway, so I really thought that this discussion was very interesting and good. I looked a little bit at what the program said and discussions around Chhattisgarh and development and democracy, and I'd like to place the context of whatever I speak about in these next 20-25 minutes in that same kind of context. Three things that I will talk about. I'll talk about MKSS a little bit as an organization and the effort within MKSS and its larger group. I'll talk about RTI and I'll talk about NREGA, but none of these three, all these three placed within the context of development and democracy in India. The MKSS, when it began, and again I'll try and link a little bit with what you all have been talking about here, that when you think of a conference, it is also to talk and to do as you're talking. And we didn't have any real answers when we began whatever work that we did. There were just a few of us who went. But one of the ideas that we did go for with a lot of conviction is that we would live our lives in a way that were, lifestyle that was in conjunction with our own ideas and ideology. And so there was not so much of what we would do. We didn't know whether one could change the world or not. Obviously, few people can't. But whatever little effort that we could make in that direction, but we did know that we could change our own lives. And we could, what we had greatest control over was actually our own lives and our own lifestyle. Even there are many, many constraints all of us face. But those are constraints that eventually one can look at by and large as a set of excuses also. And rationalization also. That is an area where we can and if we can't confront ourselves there, we can't confront the world. So that was something that gave us a lot of actually joy and strength and power, because from the very beginning we managed to live, and there are many contradictions even within our own lives, but at least we recognize those contradictions and try and address them as we go along. And it's not to wear a lifestyle on one's sleeve, but just to talk about how powerful and important that is in being able to link yourselves with larger processes of change. In Devdungri and in the work we've done, it actually is the work of a very, very large collective, and some, or maybe not even a large collective, much larger than the three of us, a large enough collective, but some brilliant people with a lot of fantastic sets of perception and understanding. And that was the second thing, that in that process of understanding that we didn't have answers, but answers would emerge from amongst the people, that actually the powerful perceptions and understanding come from people who experience those things, not through academic thought or even just discussion, but through living those things from day to day and for years. And there are sets of people who have a fantastic understanding. That's why what I'm going to do, because I thought, what can one do? And some of you may have heard some of these things, but I'm going to actually walk you through to link these three, the MKSS, the RTI and the NREGA, and this idea of where whatever our experience in where these thoughts have come through. I'm going to walk you through a set of slogans, because actually in a very succinct way, there is no more powerful people's articulation than their songs and their slogans. And it will give you an example and an idea of how over 20 years one has moved from where one has moved to where one has moved today, and where one stands today. And then perhaps we can look at a few of the challenges that face us, and then get into this discussion. So it will keep it short, but it will also credit the right people with whatever it is, that whatever perceptions that have emerged. So when we went to the MKSS area, and some of you have been here, and it's great to actually see some familiar faces, even though one just drops in somewhere. When we went to the MKSS area in 1987, everyone said, and this is another part of the theory, you're going to the wrong place. It's completely hopeless. You're not going to a place where there is either a traditional landlord, landless, feudal relationship. We went to feudal Rajasthan certainly, but it wasn't. Most of the people in that area actually migrate out, so there isn't this big powerful landlord kind of configuration. We did not go to an area that had traditionally done any kind of work. Even in Rajasthan there are the work of change. And the people of that area actually, many of them women, and some of those who migrated part of the year, were working. The first issue we confronted was drought, because it was 5th year of many years of drought. And when they went to government-run employment programs and works, they were not getting minimum wages and they were not getting work. So actually the seeds of what we've been involved in began at that very beginning, the first set of questions. Of course, they thought, "Ye kya karne aaye hain? Have they come to do mining? Have they come to do God knows what? Why 3 people have come and settled down in one hut in a village?" But there were 2 things that happened very rapidly. Number 1 was just the fact of living in the middle of a village, getting water on your own head, having people, Dalits, come in and out of the house, created the kinds of confrontation and conflict that were very necessary to define us as an organization. It defined us not from saying what we are, but defined us from, again, living and doing. Why is a Dalit coming in, sitting and eating, cooking, distributing water? Immediately led to those kinds of questions and within 1 week. It didn't take much longer than that. Who would go to drought relief works? And the fact that one of us, Shankar, was actually from that area led to the greatest pressure on him, because he was from an OBC community and the people of his own community were saying, "What's wrong with you?" and saying to his wife, "What's wrong with you?" Because they may have still seen us as alien, but they saw Shankar as one of them, and so the uncomfortable questions, both for them and for us, got raised immediately. Similarly, on the works that happened, just to give you an example, there was a limited number of people who could go to work, and there were limited amount of resources and a huge demand for work. So one of the first things we did was to identify those who we felt should not get the first work and those who we felt should get the first work, and tried to raise that as an issue. And immediately what one found was many of Shankar's relatives' names were being struck off the rolls. So Shankar himself and his family came under intense pressure saying, "What the hell? Who have you brought and what are you doing? You've come here to attack us." But that again placed us within that larger context of whose side for what issues, without getting into great ideological ideas or thoughts or expression. It was just by very simple kinds of actions that took place. Now, what happened and where did, for us, these issues of right to information and employment guarantee emerge? People went to those works and weren't getting minimum wages. They didn't get minimum wages, so they said, we want, it's our statutory right to minimum wages. And the answer that came was, well, you haven't worked. गरीब लोग तो काम ही नहीं करते हैं, और आपने काम नहीं किया, so you won't get the wage. And over 5 years, I mean, describing a 5-year process, over 5 years, from 87 to around 92, over 5 years, the questions started getting sharpened to saying, where have we not worked? First there were agitations, no, give us the wage. There were several agitations. We sat on 2 hunger strikes. And then the demand all along was, give us our minimum wage. But then slowly that demand changed to saying, show us where we have not worked. You claim you're not giving us our wage because we have not worked. Show us that. Show us those documents. And that was the seed of actually the right to information in that area, saying we want copies of our muster rolls. We want copies of those measurement books which show us that you claim show that we haven't worked. And so by about 92, the primary demand became, we want copies of bills, vouchers and muster rolls. Bills and vouchers because that was the material spent on public works, and muster rolls because that was where the labor component went. And by 94, a second demand that emerged was that we want to see, not just see those, and by then we had gathered enough strength that we could have even informally accessed or stolen access to those records, even though they were not allowed. So from some places we copied them by hand, and we gathered information of 5 areas. And a second kind of change took place, which has again got a lot to do, I think, with development and democracy, which was that the platform for public engagement, there were very powerful platforms from our own independent struggle and our own tradition of dharnas, of rallies, of hunger strikes. But what we realized in the hunger strike is that we weren't Gandhi. And therefore, we knew that, for instance, the local MLA in the first hunger strike said, हाँ 17 लोग भूख हड़ताल पर बैठे हैं, मर जाएंगे तो ठीक है, 17 लोग तो कम होंगे इस जनसंख्या। So that the quality of our administration and the response may be all along to people. There's a different response to a Gandhi, but a different response to ordinary people. And the fact that the hunger strike is meant to evoke a certain sympathy and an empathy, but those who you are trying to evoke that sympathy and empathy with are actually not at all sympathetic or empathetic with you. So, who is it that is actually giving you that response? So, after 2 hunger strikes, we sat down for a long period and thought it out. We got minor successes out of those hunger strikes, but we thought we are actually tiring ourselves. And we are not tiring the people from whom we are to get our justice. And we are going back for justice to those people who have denied us that justice in the first place. Why are they going to give it to us? Second question that came to us was that when we took those very same issues to other villages around, immediately everyone would say, even if someone had been denied 5 rupees, or every day the minimum wage was 11 rupees when we went, and as a norm people used to get 5 or 6 rupees. Everyone else said, yeah, we also get, and we are also very troubled by it. And you would come back energized. But you would go to that SDM, or you would go to that engineer, or you would go to the collector, and you would come back with the collector saying, what is it you're talking about, 1 lakh or 2 lakhs of corruption? Look at Lalu Prasad Yadav. Yeah. And what is your issue? So we said we must go back to the people. And that's when we organized a series of Jan Sunwais. It was a term that didn't exist actually at that particular time. There used to be public hearings in big, large urban centers amongst academic people. But sitting in the middle of the village, using records and document as fact as a basis to place it in front of the people and say that this is what the facts say. Now, this is what the records say. Does it match with the reality that you know? So you come and you speak, here is a munch, here are the records, here is a video camera that is recording proceedings. You speak and so can everyone else speak. The SDM is also invited, the engineer is also invited, everyone is invited. It's a democratic platform, come and speak on whatever has happened. And that changed the dynamics in another dramatic way. So what happened was those records showed that when you hadn't got minimum wages, on the muster rolls, on the work site were 25 people, on the muster rolls were 40. Where were the other 15 people who were being paid wages? They were the ones who didn't work at all and couldn't have worked because some of them were dead. They couldn't have worked because some of them actually had jobs in the railways. They couldn't have worked because some of them were names that didn't exist in the village at all. But they were being paid money. So, actually that changed the dynamic there and then in many, many dramatic ways. It also brought immediate, instant kind of results, because what they did, what that whole lot did was, okay, these 15 people's wages, let's distribute to everyone else. FIRs got lodged, even though the government first boycotted it. Putting all that in the public domain made a huge impact. But what it also did immediately was the whole bureaucracy and the government closed up and said that this access to records and this so-called public audits we will not allow at all. So these series of slogans. So the first slogan was that began was when people said that what is this? And actually when we started, we immediately, as soon as the records closed up, because you could not have a public hearing without complete access to records. And that's when the demand said that we want copies of bills, vouchers, and muster rolls. We want our right to information. That was by 93, the demand that emerged in that sense. And when ordinary people and colleagues of ours, a woman called Sushila along with others went to Delhi, and VP Singh in a meeting was actually in support of us, and one of the press people in front of him said, I want to ask this woman who's from a village in Sushila, has studied up to the 3rd or 4th standard. Why are you asking for information? What is your big deal? Why are you asking for information? And she said, जब मैं मेरे बच्चे को 10 रुपए के साथ बाजार में भेजती हूँ, तो जब वो वापस लौट के आता है और मैं कहती हूँ कि नमक लाओ और ये माचिस लाओ और कुछ और लाओ, तो वो वापस लौटता है तो मैं उससे हिसाब लेती हूँ एक एक पाई का। तो सरकार, वो तो बच्चा मेरा बच्चा है और वो 10 रुपए हमारे घर का ले रहा है और मैं हिसाब ले रही हूँ। सरकार मेरे नाम पे लाखों करोड़ों रुपए का खर्चा करती है, मैं उनका हिसाब नहीं पूछूंगी क्या? तो ये हमारा पैसा है और हमारा हिसाब है। Now today I could talk about right to information for 2 hours and I will not as succinctly and powerfully be able to come up with what was the first slogan of the right to information movement in that area, and which has now become like a slogan across the country. Hamara paisa, hamara hisab. Our money, our accounts. So it's basically a core, powerful idea, so succinctly and so powerfully elucidated and articulated in that you just actually need those 4 words to be able to understand part of it. And around the same time, there were these 2 slogans. The second slogan wasn't a slogan actually until someone else, Prabhash Joshi, who has passed away, he came to the very first dharna and he heard bits of it and he put it in a sense into a slogan. But it was a concept that was being used around there. कि हम जानेंगे, हम जिएंगे, which was connecting for the first time right to information.
Can you just translate the slogan into English?
Yeah, sorry. So so the right to know, the right to live was the first slogan. And the second slogan that was around the same time, and this is, I'm talking about the time of the first dharna. Now I moved actually from 1987 to 1996, which was the first major big dharna in a town called Byawar, which lasted 40 days. And at that time, Prabhash Joshi came and picked up the slogan and made that his column the next day, which he wrote from Delhi in Jansatta, which was the right to know, the right to live. So it connected right to information not with an academic issue of freedom of speech and expression, but with a completely, it connected that issue. Right to information on its own is meaningless actually. Right to information only means something when it connects with a particular issue. And it connects with issues, that's what brings it alive. But connecting it with freedom of expression is powerful, but not as powerful for ordinary people as when it's connected with my rations, my medicines in the hospital, my wages on the Mazdoor, my development in my village, all of which you cannot survive without that rations, you cannot survive without your wages, you cannot survive without the medicine in the hospital, and you cannot get all of that until you know what it is that you're supposed to get. So, hum janenge, hum jiyenge is again the discourse on right to information turned around actually for the first time in the world. Because all along, if you look at right to information across the world, it was always a freedom of expression issue. It was never a livelihood and survival issue, as it had become when poor people in India took it up and connected it with themselves. And again, that's the articulation of people themselves, not the articulation of me or Aruna or even Shankar, who's a fantastic person at articulation. It is an articulation of a large collective of people over a period of time, trial and error, struggling it out, fighting it out in many ways until they emerge with the nerve center of what it is they want and say it in a way that is as powerful as that. The slogans go on simultaneously from Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab to a question of not just, it started off actually with Mera Paisa. Because if you did not get your wage, people used to say, ये सरकारी पैसा है, जलने दो, when we first went. That's the biggest problem any of us face when we go to any area. There's so much cynicism and actually a sense of alienation. So the first thing is that wage connected it to Mera Paisa. Because you had worked for that wage. It wasn't even some government spending on some government project somewhere, some overall inefficiency or corruption of government, but it was that you will not get your wage on the muster roll for which you have worked until you see that this is Mera Paisa. Or Mera Paisa, Mera Hisab became collectively, because no one was getting their wage, Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab. And over a period of time, it became Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab turned to not just a question of Hisab, but to decide how that money is to be spent. What is the project? Should that road only go to the Sarpanch's house? Should the hand pump be dug in a Dalit Basti or in a fourth hand pump in the main Basti? So it became, ये पैसे हमारे आपके नहीं किसी के बाप के. This money is yours and mine, no one's feudal property. So I think shall we say these slogans as we go along? Yeah. Okay. So I don't have all the English equivalents, but we can do the Hindi one. Yeah, so we'll start with the first one. So, Hamara Paisa,
Hamara Hisab,
Hamara Paisa,
Hamara Hisab,
Hamara Paisa,
Hamara Hisab.
ये पैसे हमारे आपके
नहीं किसी के बाप के,
पैसे हमारे आपके
नहीं किसी के बाप के,
पैसे हमारे आपके
नहीं किसी के बाप के.
So do you feel a little bit of the power that they felt, that we felt as these slogans emerged and were being articulated? So, and they were and they are these entire large concepts which have been debated for the last 10 years in the country, articulated in the kind of powerful, succinct, perceptive, sharp ways in which people do these articulations, if they get those kinds of platforms to emerge. Okay, we should also say that other slogan, कि हम जानेंगे,
हम जिएंगे,
हम जानेंगे,
हम जिएंगे,
हम जानेंगे,
हम जिएंगे,
हम जानेंगे,
हम जिएंगे.
And ये पैसे हमारे आपके changed into not just money and not just deciding about money, but also the institutions and how they've been alienated from us in a democracy. So it was, ये पंचायत हमारे आपकी,
नहीं किसी के बाप की,
पंचायत हमारे आपकी,
नहीं किसी के बाप की,
सरकार हमारे आपकी,
नहीं किसी के बाप की,
सरकार हमारे आपकी,
नहीं किसी के बाप की,
ये देश हमारे आपका,
नहीं किसी के बाप का,
ये देश हमारे आपका,
नहीं किसी के बाप का,
दुनिया हमारे आपकी. Because actually that is the entire journey of where sets of people who have been involved for a long time, who began with very small, seemingly small for them, very important questions about their lives and livelihood and connection with governance and public ethics and work and their own wages, began a set of questions that each led to the other, and would lead any of them, except for the fact of language, if they were to be speaking here, many of them, they would perhaps articulate it again as powerfully in different ways, but as comprehensively as I am able to here. And the reason is that they have gone through that long kind of journey. So, along with that, I'll take 5 minutes more and then we can have discussions, is the issue of the employment guarantee. As I mentioned to you in the very beginning, at that same time when people were saying, why aren't we getting minimum wages, they were also saying, why aren't we getting work? And in saying that we want work, and actually that fight between the poor person and Shankar's relative was also a very unfair fight. It was a fight placed there by an affluent set of policymakers who said, here are the crumbs, fight with the crumbs. And fight amongst yourselves. Because Shankar's relatives actually were also very not affluent. And they were also suffering from drought, and their animals had also died. And they did not also have access to resources. They were more powerful than the poorest of the poor. So they could squeeze them. But everyone squeezes below. So how do you build an alliance for something at least at a basic minimum? And how do you build a concept of entitlements at that level? So the slogan that emerged again, which became sort of the slogan of the demand for employment guarantee. Of course, Employment Guarantee Act had come in Maharashtra in 1975. That remained the inspiration for all of us. No other state government passed it after that. No other governments sort of passed many schemes which said employment assurance scheme, JRY, which was supposed to give some amount of employment, but actually ended up giving 5 or 6 days to people. So the first slogan that emerged in that, and that remained for a long time, was "Har haath ko kaam mile, kaam ka pura daam mile." Because again, it just put two things: that you want work and you want just return for that work. So that again became such a large coalition, and maybe we can use that because that's something that concerns all of us in every way. Har haath ko kaam mile.
काम का पूरा दाम मिले.
Every hand must get work, and every bit of work must get just reward or just compensation. That's right. So that slogan became certainly a powerful slogan, but no thought actually that, because the first time we went to who was the current Chief Minister of Rajasthan, and he lost in between. First time we went to him saying we need an Employment Guarantee Act in Rajasthan, and that was 1998. He laughed at us. He said, "Are you nuts?" He didn't say, "Are you nuts?" in English because he speaks in English. He said, "पागल हो गए हो क्या? ये हमारे देश में और हमारे राज्य में ये हो सकता है कि कोई गारंटी हो सकती है एम्प्लॉयमेंट की? आप देख रहे हो कितना मुश्किल है काम देना." And that same chief minister, because over a period of time one kept at it, one highlighted starvation deaths, one highlighted anemia, one highlighted the lack of employment, that same chief minister by 2002 had made a statement in Delhi saying, until we have an Employment Guarantee Act in this country, we will continue to have reports of starvation deaths. So, and he set up a committee which was not a serious committee, but at least he set up a committee. He didn't say pagal ho gaye, to explore how could we have a limited Employment Guarantee Act at the state level. So it was an acknowledgement, if nothing else, of the importance of this kind of thing. And today in Rajasthan, after that Employment Guarantee Act, because there are many things that I could talk about, but I won't, but after the Employment Guarantee Act has been passed last year in Rajasthan, the expenditure on the Employment Guarantee Act was 7,000 crores. So what, about just under $2 billion? And the number of people who got employment in Rajasthan was 70 lakh families. And the average expenditure in a panchayat that used to come in used to be about 5 or 6 lakhs, and now it's on an average about 1 crore. The average, on an average, each district in Rajasthan, in southern Rajasthan districts, which are the tribal districts, Banswara, Dungarpur, who were completely cash-starved and resource-starved, have had expenditure to the tune of 150 and 200 crores per year. So suddenly the rural economy, and actually all the criticism of NREGA, all the criticism by all these big economists, and now of course it's become the darling of everyone, and that's a danger of its own. But all the initial criticism, and when there was this whole economic collapse across the world, we had banyas in Bhim telling us, "Aapke rozgar guarantee ne hame bacha diya." Because the rural market not just survived but flourished, because those rural markets had never had an injection of money of that kind that the Employment Guarantee had brought. So there are many problems and issues, many corruption issues, which I should actually go into, but I don't have that much time. But the broad picture, and I'd just like to again bring one more slogan in to complete that picture, that when we were campaigning for the Employment Guarantee Act is the same time as the BJP was campaigning for Trishul Diksha. Gujarat had finished, they were on a high, the entire Sangh Parivar, and they felt very strongly that the next could be the neighboring states. So Rajasthan, parts of Madhya Pradesh were hardest hit, and we had some terrible people doing terrible things inspired by Gujarat, and they were doing these Trishul distributions all over the state and these ceremonies. And at that time the slogan then converted from "Hum har haath ko kaam mile, kaam ka pura daam mile" to "Trishul nahi, talwar nahi, har haath ko kaam do." So you don't want a trishul in your hand, you don't want a talwar in your hand. What you want is work, and that was so dramatic. Not that we had the power to take on the BJP in the way that they are, the strength that they are. But if we had said Trishul mat baanto, a few of us may have been beaten up. In some cases, we would have been completely isolated because we would have been reacting to an action that they were doing without being able to catch people's imagination, because they were holding the frustration of people. But when we counterposed it with what you actually want, it exposed their program so dramatically, because what will you get from a Trishul? And the frustration of people was that they didn't have work and didn't have money. So this juxtaposition of Trishul nahi chahiye, talwar nahi chahiye, har haath ko kaam chahiye, actually exposed the BJP, and over again they started getting asked across the state, what are you doing for a positive agenda? You're only causing battles all across, but what are you doing for really solving people's problems and giving people something? And so I brought again this slogan in to give you an idea again of how, and again it's 5-6 words that encompass such a wide spectrum of thoughts of different kinds. Now I'll just go a little bit into some of the challenges that exist, and then we can have a discussion. The challenges that exist today is that those same 7,000 crores are actually a huge attraction for that vested interest that has so skilled in squeezing out the little that was coming earlier, that this big amount for them is I mean, if it's something that's a saving grace for people, it's for them, it's a great big opportunity. And I'll give you just examples from Rajasthan. On the labor side, I think dramatic things have been done. I don't have again the time, maybe in some of these free sessions we can talk a little bit about it. But on the labor side, we've made dramatic sort of progress in being able to stop labor-based corruption. Primarily through right to information and transparency. Just by showing things, putting them on notice boards, reading out muster rolls, having things go into bank accounts. On the labor side, people are those who are going to work are getting their wages. They are getting close to the minimum wage in most places. They are getting, so homes are getting this 10,000 rupees. But on the material side, so if your expenditure is 7,000 crores, out of that 40% can be labor, can be material. So it ends up in a given panchayat of being 40-50 lakhs spent on material. And on material side, there aren't those boards. People don't also care that much, because once they've got their wage, they're unable and unwilling to give it that kind of attention. They are, but they are not encouraged in that. So the kinds of figures we've come up with and what we found is that, number one, now when we are doing our social audits, which is actually a means of institutionalizing the public hearing process of the Jan Sunwai process. And it's very important for democracy that we find out ways and means to actually institutionalize this. Because we may do a Jan Sunwai in 5 places, in 10 places, in 30 places. Eventually we have to be able to make it part of the system. It will suffer, it will not do as well. We are always there to be able to do our own Jan Sunwais. But we must be able to provide a platform for everyone across the board and institutionalize that. So in the challenge of that institutionalization, there has been huge, powerful opposition, where sarpanches across the state, along with gram sevaks and engineers, have been physically blocking us, beating up people, blocking highways, doing all kinds of things, and this is just a precursor of what will come. Because in 10 places where there were to be social audits along with government last year, which were physically stopped, and the High Court was also, they approached the High Court and managed to get a stay. I'll give you the figures. The corruption that has been found in 1 year in material expenditure has ranged from, there were 2 places where no corruption was found, but I think there's a problem with one of those reports. one place there really was no corruption. But in the other, not 10, 18 places, the lowest level of corruption found by government special auditors has been 15 lakhs in 1 year, in one panchayat. And the highest amount that was found was 1.5 crores. So what we have found is that the more corrupt, the more material works are sanctioned there. The less is the system's willingness to actually make sure that money does not go into someone's pockets. And the point is not that there are not bigger scams. There are huge, much bigger scams in the country. But the point is that when you have a particular sarpanch in a year with access to 20 lakhs, that means you have a gang that is built up and getting built up around that sarpanch and the engineer and that entire lot, who will physically ensure that no one raises their voice. So that is a very big challenge. It's a very big challenge across the board, and that's why even though we are the biggest supporters of NREGA, it is also our duty, and it's the irony of that, to point out the corruption and keep bringing it out. And of course what happens is promptly those same economists suddenly wake up and say, so, see, we told you it will all go into someone's pocket. But the fact is that that is a kind of challenge that faces all of us. And I know AID has been doing a lot of work in NREGA and RTI. And audits and public audits actually are a marriage of the two. I don't have the time to go into many of the things that I would have liked to have mentioned, but I'll end actually this thing, since it's on democracy, with a quote that I had heard after 10 years of democracy in South Africa by a member of South Africa's Communist Party, a person called Jeremy Cronin, who said this but put it together, that what is the challenge of democracy? The challenge of democracy, he said, is speaking truth to power, making the powerful truthful, and making truth powerful. So the marriage of all these three, of employment guarantee, right to information, and trying to live your life, and through your life, your principles, and through those principles, make another world possible, or a better world possible, is actually this combination of pushing for what an idea of truth is, because it's an evolving, complex idea, and making sure that power responds to those voices of truth in some way or the other. I'll give you one more quote, because in terms of things like Chhattisgarh and this whole Maoist question, it's a quote from Lal Singh Ji, who some of you know. It's a quote well used but well worth repeating. We went during the middle of the Right to Information campaign, when the entire bureaucracy was rained against us on one side, but a state law had been passed, a national law had not been passed, and we were on dharna in Jaipur on some other issue, and the State Academy of Administration called us to speak to some IAS officers who had come from the Mussoorie Academy to speak about right to information in Rajasthan. So Aruna and Shankar and I were called, but we said, okay, Lal Singh Ji and Narayan, two of the people who were with us on dharna, why don't you come along? So it was a cold winter's day. So Lal Singh Ji just picked up the dari on which the dharna was going on and wrapped it around himself and went in. His safa and dhoti. And we went there and we spoke, and it was quite a contentious kind of session, and it was quite heated. And first Aruna spoke, then I spoke, then Shankar spoke. And then they had got quite fed up with us, the whole lot of them. And they looked at their watch, and the supervisor said, well, lunch is coming quite soon. So now why don't Narayan and Lal Singh Ji finish, and we can give them 5 minutes each. We had, of course, Aruna, Shankar and I had spoken 15 minutes each, so that seemed quite unfair. And we were bonding, and then Lal Singh Ji got up and said, I don't need 5 minutes, I need only 1 minute. And he said, and I'll say it in Hindi and then I'll repeat it in English. He said, and this is the first time he had said it, he had not thought it, I don't know where it came from. He said, हम सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार नहीं मिले तो हम क्या रहेंगे या नहीं रहेंगे, हम जिएंगे
या नहीं जिएंगे। आप लोग सोचते हैं, and he pointed to them, कि सूचना का अधिकार मिल जाए तो आपकी कुर्सी रहेगी या नहीं रहेगी। लेकिन दोस्तों, हम सबको मिलके सोचना चाहिए कि क्या ये देश रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा। So he said that we think that if we don't get the right to information, will we survive or not survive? You all think that if the right to information comes, will your power survive, your kursi survive or not survive? But actually the question that we all need to ask ourselves is, will this country survive or not survive? Will this world survive or not survive? And that is actually the question. So that is actually the question. Actually, when he came back, Aruna said, "I'm giving you the Padma Bharat Ratna," because it really was. I mean, it was one of those strokes of brilliance. Where it came from, God only knows. But that is the question, and that's an opportunity that something like right to information gives us, and this truth to power and truth as a basis gives us. That when we are fighting, and when we can clearly see what is on in Chhattisgarh, what is on in Odisha, what is on in Jharkhand, what is on actually right across the country. Those are very dramatic examples, but what is also on in every other part of the country is a massive battle for resources and share of resources. In the claim of being a democracy, one of the most powerful tools that all of us can use is a resort to truth. To say, let us argue on the basis of fact. Let us place facts on the table and let us all come on a platform and look at what the facts are. And then take our decision and understand who is taking what for whom and how much. Some people like us, some people will use the gun. Some people will use the gun on one side, some on the other. Some of us who are not willing to do that. For us, some of the most powerful ways in which we can do it, and some of the only ways in which we can do it, is by creating these platforms where honest, fact-based debate can take place. And the experiences of our Jan Sunwais are the same information that we could have never put out and people wouldn't have accepted, and if we had put it out, we would have got beaten up. In that kind of platform, gave an opportunity for real transfer and change of power. So those are the challenges I think that we face in our democracy today, because everyone knows who's looting whom for what, but that's not being allowed and given the space to be exposed in that sense, and that's a kind of weapon or tool or method that needs to be used also. That's it.
You better sing, Chori Babu.
No, I can't sing. I wish I could, yeah. If anyone else from the MKSS has been here, you would have heard 3-4 songs by now. But I am the one in the MKSS who's told, stay at the back, don't go there.
So maybe we can open up for questions now.
Yeah, will someone do that or
Yeah,
should
yeah.
I? Yeah.
I am Neha from Duke. My question is, who makes the person who's giving the information, like who appoints that person? I mean, I understand that you file the RTI and they're responsible to give you that information, but who assigns, I mean, how do you know who is the one responsible for giving the information?
Yeah, in the law, every office must have a PIO, Public Information Officer.
Right.
So each office is supposed to appoint its PIO. And actually now many offices, everyone is trying to run away from that responsibility of being appointed PIO. But nevertheless, it's the duty of that office, and it is actually the duty of the office to have a board outside that says that you have a right to information. You can get any information within 30 days, file an application, the name of the PIO in this office is so-and-so, sits in such and such place, the name of the appellate authority is so and so, sits in such and such place. So one of the things all of us need to do is make sure those boards are there. Because the PIOs are there, but they are hidden in many cases. So the way to do it is to get those boards out and then that you.
Hi, I'm Swati from Duke. I just wanted to ask you that about the Jan Sunwais you did. So from the time you actually think that you need to do Jan Sunwais to get to a stage that you can do Jan Sunwais, that takes a lot of effort, right? And a lot of our projects which we are supporting are facing that kind of problem, that even if you have the information, there's not enough confidence in the people to actually come and ask the government officials or question the government officials. So there are various measures being taken, but just wanted to ask you that if there's something specific which you did to help the people out.
Yeah, it's a very good question because it's not easy to do a Jan Sunwai. That is the truth. It is powerful as a mode. When you do it, you see the dramatic results, but it is true. And it is also true on the other side that many people do end up doing a khichdi of a Jan Sunwai. So everything these days is being called Jan Sunwai public hearing, which is something again, it's another session or another time, what constitutes, what are the minimum requirements for doing something like a public hearing. But I'll use this opportunity to actually give you an idea of what I think is a fantastic thing that can be used all over and people can push, and it's something that's emerged recently in Rajasthan, meaning in the last 6 months, which is that one step of the public hearing or the Jan Sunwai is to get information, is to collate it, which is difficult because in NREGA, for instance, you have thousands of muster rolls and lakhs of workers, and in a panchayat you will have 1,000 workers on many muster rolls. You need to put that information together so that you can present that succinct information. So that's one of the big challenges. It's very time consuming to do that. And the third is to present that information in that platform of the Jan Sunwai, to get a response and then get government to respond. So all those various steps are there, just briefly. Now one of the things that has emerged, for instance, on the labor side, is that I don't know how many of you have seen the NREGA website. Quite a few. If you go in that website, earlier it didn't have it, it's had it through this process. You actually get what we are supposed to do in the public hearing process, because every muster roll has to be entered. Every bill and voucher has to be entered, every measurement book has to be entered. So actually all of you who are IIT experts, the most easy, obvious method is you just press one button and you get the collated information. How many days has someone worked on which work site for how many rupees? How many days has a job card holder worked in the whole year in which work sites for how many rupees? So that information that tediously used to take a long time can actually come at the press of a button. A, if the accurate information has been uploaded, and B, if that software is there and works. It does work. The software does work. The inputs haven't been good across the country. But that's something that can be pushed by saying that all expenditure should be transaction based, so that that information will be accurate. But what I am saying is that even if you do that, how many people will go to the website? Maybe some of your projects will, but given in India, how many people will go? So what has emerged as an order in Rajasthan, and I'll try and mail you copies and mail you some of the photographs and show you some of the results, is that information that comes, that how many days has a person worked for how much money in a year, is now by order to be painted on the walls, not of the panchayat, but of that village. Because in a panchayat there may be 1,000 workers, in the village there will be 70, 80 workers, in a mohalla or the village. If that is painted on, name of the worker, job card number of days worked 80, amount of money earned 8,500. That is like a web wall, or slogan हम जो कह रहे हैं एक एक पाई दीवार पर आए, so every paisa on the wall. So once it comes there, then every year you don't have to write the person's name. You just have to write next year, 2009-10, 2010-11. And what we would have to go around house to distribute. People will walk by and see. And it's had fantastic results. Again, I even have a film with me. Sometimes this time we can see 2 or 3 minutes of it, which will show you that as soon as those stuff come on the walls, some places people are scared, they don't raise their voice. But even more scared are those guys who have made a false job card and given false money. Because every day they confront that wall. And every day they are scared who's going to speak about it. So next year, already we've seen the results. Their corruption has on its own reduced. So it's a dramatic kind of measure. And that's so there are today 100,000 walls in Pakistan that have been painted. It's taken 6-7 months to do that, to push it. It's something that now will soon be a national order. We'll try and get that to you also. All your people can push it. It will take a lot of effort to get it implemented. And similarly, we are putting orders for material expenditure. In that panchayat, in that ward, whatever work was done in the ward, how many bags of cement? How many trolleys of reet? How many trolleys of stone? How many bricks? And that again, maybe there'll be 19-20 ka farak, and you won't be able to catch that, but at least there won't be the dramatic lakhs and crores that we are finding in material. Yeah.
I have a question for you to put NREGA, Rural Employment Guarantee, and right to information in the perspective of what Indian society should strive for. If you take the rural family at its poorest in most different states, and rural employment guarantee is given to them, and right to information is fully accessible to them, and that becomes true throughout rural India, to what extent will they attain a decent standard of living and dignity by those means alone, even if they're fully attained?
Yeah, I see actually that's a very good opportunity for me to say something I should have said, which is not that through NREGA, through RTI a lot can be done because it affects many aspects of people's lives. But it's not to say that through NREGA you'll suddenly reach a standard of living which is good enough. What is it, 10,000 rupees? But both these laws are a fantastic opportunity for popular mobilization and confrontation of power centers. For the first time, the NREGA has given the rural poor an opportunity to come on one platform, because otherwise they are all separated on little farms or little contractors or in various migratory spots. It's given an opportunity to women to mobilize, and therefore what you get is, yes, if implemented properly, you will not have starvation. That is our belief. You will still have levels and degrees of malnutrition because just food grain is not enough. It's enough for you to meet, we've seen in Rajasthan, that it's enough for you to meet maybe the food grain plus a little bit of requirements for a family. It's enough for a little bit of a supplementary income. But more than that is that it's an opportunity for people to say, for instance, now across the country, for the first time, minimum wages in the country have become a reality, close to a reality, even in places where it's not being implemented properly. So it affects your wage in all other work that you do. So it's not that alone, it is that how it's affecting democracy and how it's affecting the economy and your own power in the economy that shows where you need to go in the future. Today it's not that it's everything, but it's several steps in that direction.
This is Divya from 8 Portland. Most of what you have been talking about is the right information with the government sector, people asking the government. I would like to know what is the situation and what is going on in the private sector, are there movements or are there groups where you're aware of where people are asking construction site owners or somewhere, because the issue of migrant laborers going out into cities is huge, and are there places where migrant laborers are demanding minimum wages? So,
anybody see a book like this that says meets and
yeah, actually more important than the construction sites which are small. See, a lot of the construction happening in India today, big construction, actually the government is the principal employer, because infrastructure building is taking place, let's say, whether Commonwealth Games or somewhere else on highways, and it's all converting into machine-based employment by and large. But let's say someone's building their house and there's a laborer going there. Yeah, minimum wages would be an issue. But because of NREGA, what has been found in the complaint across the board, so much so that people are complaining we don't get domestic labor because of NREGA. That's their complaint. Hamare paas, people don't want to come and work for those exploitation wages that all our people pay people for domestic labor. But the larger question of the private sector is very important. For instance, the mining companies, Coca-Cola, whoever else. Now, there is one clause in the Right to Information Act which has been underused and which should be used much better, which is Section 2F says that you can get any other information from any private body that can be accessed by the government under any other law in force. So under the Pollution Control Act, whatever the government can access, you can access through that to that company. Whatever under the Companies Act, the companies are required to give the government, you can access. Whatever under the Medical Practitioners Act, the various medical practitioners are supposed to report to the government, you can give. Whatever any NGO is supposed to report under the Societies Registration Act or that it has to give the government, you can access. So it is a section that can be used and can be actually forced to make the government access that information which should be accessing, but it isn't. Much of the pollution control information, for instance, that's required is not being accessed. We can make the government access it and also give it to people. And so that is just one means.
I just wanted to ask, something, which has been bothering me about, because I've been working on, farmers' issues and agriculture issues. I'm a big, supporter of the NREGA Act in general, and I think that one of the things, like you said, it has done is to actually make minimum wages a reality, right? So in all the other work also, actually what we find in AP is that, agricultural laborers are also getting much above the minimum wage, which is a good thing. But one thing that has happened is that the
middle farmers got squeezed.
Yeah, so the middle farmers, the small and medium farmers are getting squeezed, partly because of the that they have to pay higher wages, which should be fine. There should be no question about it because they have to pay minimum wage or more. But labor availability also has become an issue, but I think that also, of course, has to be handled somehow or other. But the thing which I think is problematic is that in the NREGA's works, actually the people are able to get a day's wage by working only for 3 hours. See, that is the norm across the state, that they are working only for 3 hours per day and getting the day's wages, and that is actually having a very adverse impact because I think that it is impacting the work culture in the sense that when a farmer employs a laborer for work, if it's fair for the farmer to expect, let's say, 7 or 8 hours of work, but the laborers are ready to work only for 3-4 hours, so that kind of a thing. And secondly, it is also it's also affecting the agriculture operations in at some critical times or something. So somehow I feel that this whole thing about the impact on agriculture needs to be looked into deeper and just one other point I think is that I think the articulation of the right to work and NREGA employment guarantee has been happening, over the last 20 years, right? From the Maharashtra onwards. But it so happened that the time that it has been actually come into being is also at the peak of an agricultural crisis. That the last 10-15 years have been a deep agricultural crisis. So that needs to be handled, quickly. Otherwise, it can become a bit.
Yeah, two things. One is I think that the agriculture crisis needs to be handled. Period. That cannot, which is being done. Its small portion may come from the NREGA because I discount the entire thing about wages. That's not an NREGA fault. That's actually a correction that's taken place in the NREGA. That's a fault of the agriculture sector being forced to survive on factoring sub-minimum wages as one of their costs. So that needs to be handled separately, and us mixing up the two actually plays into the hands of that same group that wants to say that no, NREGA has actually harmed agriculture. NREGA has not harmed agriculture. Agriculture has been not given the kind of attention it has. Now the question are two. One is the work culture, because I think that is a serious concern. And we have, and this is something on which we have faced a lot of criticism also. For instance, in Rajasthan, we have, again, in terms of a slogan said, Pura Kaam, Pura Dam. So we've said, keep your work norms reasonable, but after that, the work norms must be met. And there must be a transparent method of ensuring that those work norms are met. So that it is not a handout, it is actually a works program. That many of our own friends and colleagues have said, why are you bothering about whether work norms are met or not? That's up to them. You should just ensure that wages are paid as they should be paid. We have, for a long time, held otherwise. And that's part of the reason that we think that when you put in a certain amount of work, the work must be reasonable, but you put it in, you're much more powerful, stronger in being able to demand it. And finally, the strength of the NREGA will come from that sense of pride and understanding. The second part of it is to tie in the kinds of work with actually helping agriculture. Starting off with helping the smallest and poorest. For instance, if you tie it in with the forest workers bill, those who get their land pattas can also have NREGA work on those particular plots of land as a first priority. All land allottees should have NREGA work on their land as a first priority. All Dalits should have NREGA work on their land. Now that is true that the big farmer will still not benefit, but the big farmer will benefit if you have proper planning of water resource management within that particular area. And you can, as more and more things are coming into what we are calling sustainable, but even government is now saying do organic farming. And if you start doing organic farming, there are many aspects. If groups of people start thinking along with farmers in such particular areas of how exactly you can design NREGA to benefit the agriculture sector as a whole. That's work that second generation that I don't think has been done, almost not at all. And we have, I'd say, a very rural development minister, central union, who has every day he wants a new scheme. So NREGA, every day some new idea or the other, and he's playing hell into it. And as a result, and I think all of us need to pay attention, because NREGA is such a massive canvas. You can do only a few things. You need to do them well. You need to work out the accountability mechanisms, and you can do many pilots. And maybe we can fight for pilots so that in each area you can see what can emerge.
Let's take maybe last 2 or 3 questions.
Nikhil, at one point you spoke about the issue of violence and and how decisions are made as to how not to go in that direction, the broader context of Maoist thing, etc. I want to make a distinction between violent struggles and militant struggles. If I characterize MKSS and all of what it did as a very militant struggle, because I think there's a particular way in which militant and violent are confused with each other. Right. And the notion of peace is held as separate, peaceful. Right? If I characterize MKSS as militant, would you agree?
Number one, I'd say that the distinction between militant and violent, I fully agree that there is a distinction. Whether MKSS is a militant struggle or not, I'd have to leave it to others to decide. I'd like to say it is, because I think there is a great need for militant struggle, because there is such an unfair situation that exists. And if you're not militant, then there's something wrong. Militant in both your demands and your means of achieving it. And I think, again, the militancy is not at all determined by violence. It is determined actually by your determination and your creativity at particular points in time. And even militant struggles have to look at creative opportunities. And it's a question of having your antenna up while being completely committed to what you think is justice and a movement towards justice. So I would like to say that MKSS was and remains a militant organization, but that.
Can you tell us about procedure to hold a public hearing? And the second part I have is like you have talked about NREGA, RTA implementation in NREGA and the information on the wall. So can we extend somehow it to the schools and the hospitals, like attendance of the teachers in the schools and attendance of doctors in hospitals, medicines distributed?
Do you think we can?
We can, but
so then that's the answer. Of course we can.
My question is the road to that side is clear right now or no?
Yeah, actually again I'll use this opportunity to say some of the things that an organization like AID can do, because AID has done so much on RTI. It's another thing I'd like to place on record, because during the time of the amendments, all of you in various places, your messages, your badgering the PMO, your various other things that you did were very useful. And there are many crises that will face RTI in many ways. But I think one of the things that a group like this can do, and one of the kinds of projects you can encourage, is potentially one of the most radical parts of the RTI Act is Section 4 of proactive disclosure. It says that these are the 17 things that without anyone asking for it, government must make proactively available. And there are 17 comprehensive things. It leaves out almost nothing, actually. From salaries to what people get, to what they were doing, to what they're planning to do, to what they've done, to how they've done it, to what files there are. It covers everything. The trouble is, government is obviously not keen to do it. So all it does is whatever it needs to do symbolically, 17 things on the website. But those of us, if we were to put together a template, a proper template of this is what Section 4 can be for a PHC. Basically that wall is Section 4. We also got it done through saying Section 4 requires you to do it. And it's not to do it on the website, it's to do it in a way that people can immediately access and understand. So if you all do that, my suggestion is, and think about it, in health, in education, in medicines, in agriculture policy, in GM foods, and one of the biggest victories on GM food side was part of this, but again it's too long to get into. So I think that's something that can and should be done, and a group like this can connect with people and do it over a period of time. It's not a 3-day affair. It's actually will take a long time to do it, but commit that.
Can we have just last two questions, Shyam and Somu? Can you just go ahead?
My name is Shyam and I'm from the Boston chapter. I have a question in two parts. The first part being that I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, and I'm going to say that NREGA, though I'm totally in support of it, right?
That's not enough of a devil's advocate.
I'm starting it off so that I don't get lynched. So even though I'm totally in support of it and I understand its need and it's high time that it came into practice, but from the standpoint of economics, right? How much of an effect does it make, and is it sustainable in the long run, right? That government keeps giving, though it's the right of the people, I agree, but then it's still the government that is giving. That's the first part. The second part is, like you said, the MyBop system. It still reinforces the government as a MyBop instead of the people helping themselves. Maybe it's, I mean, I don't know how to justify that people need to be independent on their own without the help of the active and overactive help of government, without relying too much on government, even though the government is supposed to be of the people and for this.
I feel like you've answered most of your questions. I don't have very much to say actually beyond that, because I feel that there are basic responsibilities of government, education, health, basic livelihood. That's why we have a government, otherwise why? And actually people have survived in spite of and despite all that the government supposedly should have been doing. The only new thing about NREGA, it's not been, otherwise government claims to have made this effort many times before, is that it has legally, for the first time, given people legal entitlements. And as I said before, part of it is that you're getting something for the first time, but another part of it is you're learning how to get what is your due. And it's due, once you learn that, you don't learn that just from the private sector completely messes around with people in India. Government completely messes around with people in India, and people who at the bottom level get the short end of everything. So it's an opportunity for them to organize and fight. That's the biggest thing I see about it. But otherwise, I don't think it's too much at all. It's peanuts actually, what is being given. And it's being given really, even then it's being given for work. Government eventually, if anything, many people make this thing that you're getting government's development work done at the cheapest possible rate, at minimum wages in all these various places. So it's actually, it is government's job to get those school buildings built, or get those roads built, or get those check dams built. So it's getting it done at the cheapest possible rate. So there's, to me actually, and even in economy, we'll have a discussion later, longer, outside of this, because, but no, I don't think that
it's not unsustainable.
no, I don't think at all. It's not unsustainable at all. And finally, it will end up giving the economy back a lot more than many of the things that government is doing that we don't even question.
I am Somu, and apart from the very good that everybody gets work, the beauty of NREGA is also it creates a very valuable rural wealth, right? So, as I understood, first few years have been a lot of hard work has been put to make it the proper implementation of NREGA and wages. Now, is there efforts moving on to also make sure that very proper rural wealth is created? And can you give some examples of some very good wealth that you think has actually benefited the community? And is there any national effort going on also in that direction to shape up the ideas of what are the wealth that should be created first, how that should be maintained?
Yeah, I think here's where actually there's been very great shortcomings. Number one, there is this allegation. For instance, if I were to go to Delhi or Bombay and talk to people who were from our class, they would say, what is this digging holes and filling them up again? They still feel that's all NREGA is. It's not. Even in areas where we are, in Rajasthan, nobody has done a single evaluation. So even if it is all bad, there's no evaluation. If it is all good, there's no evaluation. There are allegations being thrown out that it's all bad, without anyone doing a single, not in this whole country, and I've said this over and over again to many, many people who are experts at research, that show me one study that says this is the quality of assets in a district and this is what it has done or not done. So we are talking, actually, even I am talking in the air, but I don't have that. I do different kinds of work. So for me, it's not my domain to actually study, but there are, in a country like India with all its many economists and all its many study groups, there are these people who should be doing it and they are not doing it. So that is number one. So even if there's a problem with it. Number two is the planning process. It has really been very weak. And it's true that the first plot was in implementation, but it's through from proper people's planning that you will get creative assets. We've still got, in our area, anecdotally I can tell you, that the water that retention, in most of the structures, the water retention structures, I can tell you that there was water in it this year, whatever little rain fell. But there is a problem in that now everyone's stopping water in Rajasthan, there is X amount of water that falls from the sky.